Chapter 3. I think I just wrote that down in the bulletin for the title, but we actually are going to be in 3 and 4. But 4 is not very long, as you'll see. They kind of go together, at least the first part of it for sure. Isaiah 3 and 4. So Isaiah's long. It's a long book, but we are making our way through and still fresh. Just started, but I'm excited about it, and I've enjoyed so far just a few messages that we've looked at. Isaiah chapter 3. Let's see here. And we're going to go through it probably verse by verse to some extent. So I'm not going to have you stand and read the whole thing to you right now, but I just want to remind you that this morning we talked about the Mount Gerizim and the Mount of Blessing, we called it, and how Moses was commanded. Of course, it didn't take place until Joshua's ministry, but Moses was commanded that when they go into the promised land, they're going to be divided up. Gerizim and Horeb, I don't think that's right. I can't remember the name of the mountain. But the one was a blessing, mountain of blessing, one was mountain of curse, okay? And it's like if you do follow the Lord and all these commandments that he gave Moses and everything he told you to do, then you have the blessings. But if you don't, then you have the curse, okay? So try to focus this morning on, like, why wouldn't you want the blessing? And why would we get off track and not go searching for the blessings of God? But this message, I believe, takes us right back to the idea of the curse, okay? So we're kind of going in, I don't want to say circle, but we're kind of going to full completion here tonight in giving the other half of this curse. But that was way back in, before they even went into the land. Now, after Joshua, we had the time of the judges. I don't remember how many years that time frame covered, but and then we had all the kings, and now we are done with the kings, and they're getting ready to go into captivity. So many, many years has passed, but this idea of the blessing and cursing has not passed. Every time they disobey God's word, they find themselves in the cursings, very similar to the ones that we find in Deuteronomy and Leviticus and all the places where he says, even in Chronicles where he tells Solomon that these are the cursings that they'll have if they don't obey the Lord. And so here in chapter 3, Isaiah lays out, of course, under the inspiration of God, he's prophesying what God told him to, and he's going to lay out what the curses are going to look like for forsaking God. Okay, we talked about what blessings look like this morning. Now let's see what some of these curses are. Okay, so first couple verses here. Let's just start with verse 1. That's always a good place to start. Chapter 3, verse 1. For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water. Okay, so what is the stay and the staff? Now, you can kind of understand what he's talking about just by these words. What does it mean to stay? Now, I don't know if they're in or not. Yeah, I have 2 collar stays. You familiar with that word? The idea is that they will stay in place. I'm sure there's lots of other things that are called stays, and the idea is that you want something to stay there, so you'll put something that'll help it stay in place. Staff is something that you lean on, right, to support you. It's your staff. But there are other ways we use that word. And for instance, you got your staff at your workplace. That's kind of where that word comes from. It's those people you depend on, those people that you lean on. And so this is what that staff means. So when he's talking about the stay and the staff, he's talking about those things that you depend on, those things that you need. God is saying to Jerusalem, hey, I'm going to take away the stay and the staff. They represent that which people are dependent on in their life, in their community, whatever. We lean on a staff. We use stays to keep things in place. And so he says, I'm taking away the stay and the staff. And then in this verse, he also talks about the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water. Okay, so again, whatever measurement that is, whatever exactly that word is saying, we understand for sure it's talking about that dependency on that amount that you depend on every day. And it's interesting that he says stay and staff, because elsewhere in the Bible, Leviticus 26, well, in fact, let's go to Leviticus 26, which, by the way, is another example of where he talks about how they're going to be cursed if they don't follow the Lord. But we won't delve too much into this. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Leviticus 26, we could read this whole chapter and add to the sermon here, but I just want to show you this verse here. He's talking about these curses that are going to be poured out. He says, and when I have broken the staff of your bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver you your bread again by weight, and ye shall eat and not be satisfied. Again, he says, when you have broken the staff of your bread. Now that's interesting, because in Isaiah he says the stay of bread, but then he also says, I've taken away the stay and the staff. So long story short, what he's saying is those things that you depend on, okay? So in other words, I'm going to take away your bread and your water, the things that you need in life, something to eat and something to drink. The very, very basic. In fact, sometimes in the Bible, somebody's thrown into prison, and all they're given is enough to keep them alive, bread and water. You know, what was it? Micaiah, it said, give him I can't remember what it says, but basically just the smallest amount of just the worst bread, you know, just enough to keep him alive. And that's all he had to survive on, and some water. So that's, you know, God's saying, I'm taking away the food and the substance, the things that you depend on. He's talking about his curse upon Jerusalem for their disobedience, okay? Particularly, he's about to watch the northern kingdom again go into oblivion, but he's also referencing Jerusalem and Judah, which is the southern kingdom. All right, so number one, he's saying, I'm going to take away your staff and your stay. I'm going to take away the stay of bread and the stay of water. Now look at the first part of verse 2. The mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, prudent of course meaning wise, the captain of 50 and the honorable man and the counselor and the cunning artificer. Okay, that's somebody who can create things and make things pretty and build things and all that kind of stuff. And the eloquent orator. All right, let's just stop right there. So he's saying, I'm going to take away your mighty man, your men of war. He's taken away the strong leaders and the armed forces out of it. Isn't that something that every nation, every people group, like they depend on their forces? Their mighty men, their protectors, the ones that are going to keep them strong. God's like, I'm going to take them away. Your leaders are going to be weak leaders. Your armed forces are going to be weak. The second part of verse 2, he talks about the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient. These are people that are running the community. Like these are the people who are in charge, the governors, the lawmakers, those people who have the wisdom and they're able to make these things. Of course, the prophet was something that Jerusalem would have known as somebody to enforce the law, because, they were seeking God as to what the people need to do. And he's like, I'm going to take that all away from you. The third part there of verse 2 talks about the wise men. I guess that fits that as well. But the people who you would go to for instruction on how to do things, we need electricians. I'm just making it more present tense, but we need electricians. We need people who understand about mechanics. We need wise people, scientists and doctors and people who have studied certain things that we can turn to whenever we have problems, because we don't know how to do it. We don't have that wisdom and that thing. But God's saying, I'm going to take away those from you. He says, I'm going to take away, verse 3, the captain of 50, the honorable men, the counselor, the cunning artificers and the eloquent orators. He's saying, I'm taking away your teachers, your skilled laborers, the CEOs, the ones who are leading the captains of the companies. You know, all of these people I'm taking away, the skilled laborers. I'm going to take away the skilled speakers, the orators, and the people who can give talks, you know what I mean, and motivate people. I mean, all the things that a society depends on to help them be strong and to help them go forward, besides the fact that I'm taking away your bread. You know, we talked about this morning how one of the things that what we want, if we're going to say that we're blessed, is that God would provide, you know, the land to produce and to have our stores and our baskets full and have all the things we need. He's like, no, I'm taking all that away from you. Okay, you're having the curses put on you, is what he's telling Jerusalem. So these are all things that a nation depends on in our communities. He says in verse 4, I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. He says, you know, the most powerful people among you are going to be children, and there's going to be no one to stand up against them. The people that are going to really be controlling the community are the basest among you. You know what basest means? Now, nowadays, actually, people use base as kind of a good thing. Like, man, that's a based person over there, meaning like he's grounded and he knows what's going on or whatever. But no, when the Bible talks about that, like remember in Acts it says that they went to the lewd fellows of the baser sort. That's a negative thing. That's talking about like the scum, like the worst of the worst, you know, the based. And so he's like the based are going to rise up against the honorable, right? These are the ones that are going to be controlled. So you want a good sign that your nation is cursed, look around and see who's really running the show, like who's getting all the attention, who's getting by with all the things that they're doing. The young people, the base people, and all that, and this is part of a curse upon a people. And it makes sense if you just think through why it gets to that point and how it happens and what the results of that's going to be. But, you know, you don't just jump right into there. You live wickedly and you don't do the things that you're supposed to do. You don't follow God's commandments. Next thing you know, you find yourself in this type of a society. It says in verse 6, let's see here. When a man shall take hold of his brother of the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, or let his ruin be under thy hand. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be any healer, for in my house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people. The idea is that nobody wants to lead because they can barely take care of themselves, let alone rule over a cursed people, right? It says, For Jerusalem is ruined and Judah is fallen because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord to provoke the eyes of his glory. And so he's like, these people are coming to him saying like, well, at least you have a house, at least you have clothing, you know, why don't you rule over us? And this guy's like, I'm in no position to rule, and neither do I want to rule over. This is a cursed people. Like, I don't want anything to do with ruling over these people and being a healer. I'm not going to provide any healing. I'm not going to help the situation. That's what he's saying. So the people that are supposed to be running the country, or not the country, but the people, you know, whoever he's cursing, the people group, the nation, the people that are supposed to be ruling them, that the society depends upon, if that nation is cursed, these people are going to fail. These people aren't going to be here. This is what the situation is going to look like. Okay, verse 9 through 15 talks about their countenance, okay? When they get to this point, it says their countenance doth witness against them. Verse 9, the show of their countenance doth witness against them. And they declare their sin as Sodom, they hide it not. You're talking about a cursed people, okay? So it's people that you can just look at and say like, man, you can just look at that person and tell they're evil. You can just look at that person and say, you know, that's that person's sin is out in front. They're not trying to hide it. Okay, you know, they're just wearing it on their sleeve, so to speak. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Say ye to the righteous that it shall be well with him, for they shall eat of the fruit of his doing. Woe unto the wicked, it shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hands shall be given him. It's like they're going to get what they deserve, okay, by just living openly in sin, disobeying God, acting as if they're not going to be judged for it, you know. There's this, I can't remember where the verse is in Malachi. I could probably find it real quick if I wanted to, but it talks about you now call the proud happy, okay? And basically they're saying God's not going to judge us. And I find it really interesting where our society has gotten to this point where pride is like this big thing, right? And they live openly in their sin. And isn't it funny, like I think it's really strange, I guess you could say coincidence, but not a coincidence, that the whole pride group, you know, that flaunts their pride and whatever, they fly a rainbow flag. Isn't that something? What's significant about a rainbow flag? Well, we understand what the Bible tells us what a rainbow is about, right? That God's not going to curse the earth anymore for their sake with rain. Now, we know he's going to judge it by fire one day, but isn't it interesting that the group that's very prideful and says, God's not going to judge us, and who are you to judge us? And they're flying this rainbow as if like, hey, God's not going to judge us. We're happy, and we're, you know, just rainbows and unicorns and all this kind of stuff, which, interestingly enough, there are unicorns involved in that group. But we're talking about people who are like Sodom, by the way. That's what the text says. Their sin, they're just open about it. Who are you to judge us, Lot? You know, who are you to tell us not to live this wicked lifestyle? They're just open and flamboyant about it, and they're not even trying to hide it. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. That's verse 9. Pretty powerful text here. This is a people who are under a curse. This is part of the curse in one sense, you could say, but it's also going that direction is what leads them to the curse to begin with, but it's also kind of a show of the curse. And when they get to that point and God turns them to a reprobate mind, this sort of stuff. Okay, so notice in verse 12, it said, as for my people, this is interesting. So are we not talking about your people? Or are we talking about your people? Is Jerusalem and Judah your people? Well, yeah, because his people are being judged. The Bible talks about, look at 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17. 1 Peter 4, 17. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? All right, so God is going to judge his people first because that's the most important. That's who he cares about. Those people who are his people. He wants to chasten those who he loves, right? He wants to make sure that they're living for him and that they're not living in sin. And if they do start going that direction, he's going to chastise them. Now, we talked this morning in Sunday school about the falling away and how that, you know, speaks about a time like that's always been this way, but it's also leading up to the time when the beast and the false prophet and there's a great falling away, and the man of sin is revealed, right? And they're all following him, and they're flocking to his false teachings and all that kind of stuff. Well, you know, this is just the inevitable work. As people reject God, they just find themselves falling away and living in open sin. And like we said, they become turned to a reprobate mind. But what about God's people? Yeah, they are going to suffer the results of a cursed people because they're living among them. And if we're not careful, because we're God's people, right? If we're not careful, we'll start adapting and adopting the ways of the world, adapting to the world and adopting their ways. And we will start acting like them. And God's going to judge us as a result of that. So sometimes a nation, I believe, in fact, most of the time, I would assume, if a nation is being judged, it's because of the righteous people, the remnant that's still there. God is trying to say, look, I'm going to curse these people because all these people have walked away from me, rejected me, maybe generations or whatever have rejected God, like maybe their fathers were believers and now they've walked the other way, so God's going to judge that nation. that remnant that's left is still going to be living in those situations. They're going to still be living under that curse and trying to, get through those things. And honestly, when all around you there are people being cursed for their sins, don't you think that that's going to help you as a believer to want to live for the Lord and want to come out from among that so you're not judged with the wicked? And again, if you do, like I talked about this morning, in the midst of this cursed world, you could still be being blessed by God. Now, there's still some effects of the curse that are going to rub off on you. Like you're going to experience some of that drought. You're going to experience some of that famine and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, you can still live a life that's blessed if you're following the Lord during those times. And so, when I talk about the curse of a nation, I always make reference back to the United States, who I don't want to be cursed, but let's be honest. How many years has the nation just walked away from God and accepted all these kinds of things? I just heard today about somebody who's a Christian, a believer who loves the Lord, and they talked about how they were going to vote. Now I'm not into the votes personally. I'm not really big into all that. But let me just say this. There is one side that I would never vote for. There's one side when it comes to politics, I'd never vote for that. It's anti-God. I mean, everything about it seems to be anti-God. Well, this person who's a Christian was like, well, that's the side that I'm voting for. And I don't know why. Like, I don't think that his intent was like, well, let me speed up the judgment of the United States because we need judgment. That's just not the personality of this person. I think maybe this person's blinded to thinking like that's actually the best thing for us. Look, my point is, and what I always say, is that politics isn't going to solve the curse of this nation. It will not solve the curse of this nation. I mean, that's like going to Sodom and asking the people of Sodom, to raise up a leader who's going to save you from this wicked nation. No, it's got to experience the judgment of God. Now, God's people keep living for the Lord. God's people still do right. We can be blessed. And I still believe wholeheartedly that whoever gets elected, and I mean, I'm talking about maybe not even this election, maybe future elections will be worse, Whatever the case, don't give up as Christians and be like, oh, we're doomed. What are we going to do? Just keep living for the Lord. Just keep praying for your society. Like, I believe even if in wicked leadership, God can allow laws and situations, things that are passed that are going to help us and be a benefit to us because we're blessed by God because we're living for Him. All right. But that doesn't really take away the fact that God's people are going to be a part of this cursed situation, this whole cursing. And all these people are supposed to be God's people, but they've already followed other gods and all that kind of stuff. When he says my people, he's talking about this remnant of people who are actually true believers. So he says, as for my people, all right, if you didn't think current politics in our nation was, hey, why did you throw that in there? That doesn't apply. Well, let's keep reading, and you tell me if it applies or not. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. You'll be hearing that verse a lot if a certain candidate gets elected for presidency. Okay, you'll be hearing this verse a lot. Women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths. The Lord standeth up to plead, and standeth to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancients of his people, and the princes thereof, for he hath eaten up the vineyard, and the spoil of the poor in your houses. What mean ye that ye beat my people to pieces, and grind the faces of the poor, saith the Lord God of hosts. All right. Judgment begins with the house of God. We already see the conditions that are going to be around us as a people. We see the conditions that, and again, obviously this is specifically talking about this specific group of people in the Jerusalem and Judea. But I believe as we see it all throughout the Bible, all these things still apply to us today as far as blessings and cursings go. Okay, so let's talk about these cursed people and see if this applies, if we can apply this to our current situation and whether or not our nation is going to be cursed or if our nation is going to be blessed. Now, we all sing this song. Maybe we don't all sing it, but God bless the USA, right? We want the USA to be blessed. But you tell me if we're living in a cursed nation or a blessed nation, or if we can expect God to curse the results of what's going on in our nation. All right, here we go. Number one, the children are oppressors. Okay, verse 12, first part of it. As for my people, children are their oppressors. It also said that in verse 4. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. So this is a principle here where the strong and the powerful and the wise and the influential, all these people who should be leading our country, there's nothing they can do. Like they're taking down to the point where they can't control the basest among them. They can't control the youngest and most vulnerable among them. There's nothing they can do. And so we're sort of in that situation. If you think about it, let's think about men with wealth. Okay, men in our society that have wealth. What is the big push that's going on in our society is that those men with the wealth must give their money away to these children, okay? And the first thing that goes in my mind is this constant push that's always going like, we need to raise minimum wage. Why should I be working, flipping hamburgers and making, minimum wage? I should, or what minimum wage is right now, I should be making $15 an hour instead of $9 or whatever they're making. And so, there's this idea that, hey, you have money, you should be giving that money to me. And, you deserve me. I deserve it. You owe me. And so there's this mentality where children are the ones demanding things, and the men with wealth have to give into it. Men with power must allow these children to have their rights. Okay, do you know a child under a certain age? Yeah, you could say, well, they're tried as an adult. Well, a lot of children, even if they're quote unquote tried as an adult, they get off with a hand slap if they commit some kind of, and the only reason they'll try them as an adult, if I'm not mistaken, is in the case of murder. And most of the time, there'll still be some kind of law that's passed where, hey, their brains aren't fully developed yet. They didn't know right from wrong. And so therefore, you got to let them out at a certain amount of time. They can be reformed and all this kind of stuff. It is super hard for our legal system to punish kids that are actually going to punish them to a point where like they cannot go back out and do more bad stuff, okay? And it's almost like the legal system and the government, like they know there's nothing we can do except release these kids back into the street so they can cause more problems until the point where they finally get old enough where we can lock them up or whatever the case. But it does very much seem like, obviously there are plenty of wicked older people in our country. But it does seem like the ones that you're concerned about, the hoodlums, if you will, are just children, okay? We've had a little bit of vandalism on our property, not much, but over the last few years, it's always been children that did it, causing some kind of damage or something like that. And there's no repercussions for these things. And so if you think about it, children being the oppressors, children ruling over, like part of it is, and I'm going to explain later, more so why it's this way. But part of it is just because those who do have power, if we do have any men that have power, they can't even do. They're like, their hands are tied behind their back of what they can do. Don't treat that kid too roughly or else they're going to have to pay a lawsuit and pay them $1 million, when you're law enforcement and you're trying to enforce a law, but you didn't do it just right. And I'm saying it could be a bad situation. Strong men, can't touch them, right? They're children. If if they were doing something wrong and you scolded them or disciplined them or punished them physically, now you're the one that's going to jail. You're the one that's getting in trouble. And I understand protecting the innocent children and all that. I'm not saying we should abuse children, but I'm saying in a situation where a nation is cursed, you can expect that the children are going to have more power than the men. What about the women of a cursed society? Well, you see here in verse 12, for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. Now, this wasn't a common thing in Bible days. Nowadays, it's just like, yeah, what's wrong with that? The CEO of my company is a woman, and this business is owned by a woman, and this government, this lady that arrested me was a woman, and this government official is a woman, and now it's it's almost common, right? Well, what's that tell you? If the Bible says, men are going to be weakened, and I'll get to men here in a minute, children are going to be the oppressors, women are going to lead over them. What's that tell you about a nation where that's the case? It's probably a nation under the curse of God. Now, the Bible's going to get a little specific here about these women, okay? See if these represent a good portion of the women who are in our society today. Verse 17. Therefore the Lord will smite, let me see here, I need to back up. Verse 16. Moreover, the Lord saith, because the daughters of Zion are haughty, that means they lift themselves up in pride, okay? Because they're haughty and walk with stretched forth necks, what's that mean? Nose up in the air, neck stretched out, right? Walking around. And then it says they walk with stretched out necks and wanton eyes. Now, it seems like what it's talking about kind of like a flirtatious, lustful kind of eyes. My first thought, it was a wanton, like, I don't know, because I'm thinking of a stretched out neck. I'm thinking about, this kind of prideful look or whatever. But I think the reference is, if you try to cross and check what this word means, I think it has to do with kind of a flirtatious, lustful kind of look that they give. Walking and mincing as they go. Mincing has to do with kind of skipping with small steps. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it, but you think about, I always picture someone in high heels in this situation, okay? And they're just like, you know what I mean? Like the high heels, and they're, oh. Unfortunately, we got guys in our society today that are like that, but we're talking about the women, okay? And they're mincing around with their feet, with their outstretched necks, haughty countenance, and their wanton eyes. Let's see here. Walking and mincing as they go and making a tinkling with their feet. Okay? It's not tinkle. It's not like that. Okay? It's a tinkling. Like, think of like ornaments that make noise. Okay? Verse 17. Therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. Okay? So, hey, these women who are going to be walking around haughty, prideful, they're so concerned about their appearance and all this kind of stuff. God's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give them diseases. I'm going to give them, and he talks about their secret parts, right? He's literally, I'm going to give them STDs. They might look pretty as they're all decorated and make-upped out and they're fancy and they're walking away, lustful looks that they're giving to the guys. But hey, when they're living in this wickedness, they're not going to be pretty for very long, because I'm going to give them the scab, right? I don't even know what that is, but it's, sometimes it's referred to as like whenever in Leviticus is talking about leprosy, it's talking about the scabbing on the head. And I don't know, but I'll tell you this, I saw someone the other day, and I see this. We all know Iola's full of people who are struggling with addictions, and that's unfortunate, okay? Now, yeah, if it's wickedness and God's going to be judging that wickedness, they're bringing it upon themselves. I understand that. But then being kind of compassionate as a pastor and someone who is trying to reach the unsaved people in our society, I understand that we need to rescue some of these people from, it's like they're not all reprobates. They're just people who are caught in sin and stuck in sin, and they need to get out of it, and I wish we could help them. But what I see all the time are ladies who otherwise would probably be pretty women, but you can see the results of sin in their life. And you can see, sometimes this particular one I saw the other day had what's that called? Alcoholics get it sometimes where their skin looks real dry. psoriasis, is it psoriasis or something? I can't remember what it's called, but they get like real dry. The guy that lived across from us, he had it really bad. Nobody knows what that's called? Anyway, it's something about your liver. Cirrhosis. Is that it? Does that make you like dry skin and all this? Okay, I'm sorry. We'll just edit this part out of this. There's something that people that drink a lot and all that, they get this real dry skin and they get like these red marks and stuff like that. And that's what this person had. It was like, my first thought was like, man, they need some lotion. And I'm like, I don't even think lotion will help. Their like skin is just starting to peel and they're just real sick because they, their kidneys aren't doing their job or the liver, I guess it is. I don't know. And so anyway, what I'm getting at is you can see people and you say, man, sin has hardened this person who otherwise would be pretty. But their wicked lifestyle, God's judged it. Look at verse 18. In that day, and then, not to mention, I mentioned the STDs. Like that's something that just isn't this something in the 80s? HIV, this sermon will probably be flagged and it'll get taken down off of the YouTube. I had one not too long ago. It was from a long time ago, but somehow it finally caught up. AI finally found it, and I said the wrong word, and now they flagged it and took it off of YouTube. So this one probably will too, but so I'll just go ahead and give it everything I got. Okay, so this is something in the 80s. Something came on the scene known as HIV, right? They called it the gay disease. Do you know why they called it the gay disease? Homosexuals are the ones that got it. And to this day, you can still see the majority of people who have HIV and AIDS are sodomites, okay? And you can look that up on the government website, and you can see the statistics, and you can see that's the case. In fact, over and over, you'll find this person, this notable person in society, and they're gay, and they'll be like, also this person donates to HIV, and they lost their significant other to AIDS and all this kind of stuff. Isn't it interesting? In the 80s, they recognized that they called it the gay disease. Now, you say that today, people will get so mad at you. But look, it's fact. This is where it is primarily being passed around in our society. Now, does it affect other people? Yeah, it affects other people, even heterosexual people who are sleeping around. If they're sleeping around a lot, eventually they're going to come across some man who's been with another man or something like that. And so it's being passed around. These type of people who are living this type of a lifestyle is what I'm getting at. Okay. Other example would be blood transfusion. Yes. But again, you're getting blood transfusion from somebody who has lived that lifestyle. And so they got it because of that. So it's pretty easy to see from the Bible. From common sense that this is the curse from God upon people who live that way. So STDs, not all STDs are HIV, of course, but STDs happen to be with people that live these kind of wicked lifestyle. The Lord says, I'm going to discover their secret part. Verse 18, we're still talking about the women. In that day, the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their cauls, and their round tires like the moon. Now, people don't actually wear spare tires as an ornament. This was, I'm pretty sure, reference to tiring the hair, which I think is like kind of like a turban, right? It's a headdress. The caul, I believe, has something to do with like a decoration that they would wear in their head, like a forehead necklace or something like that. I don't know what you call it. A band on their forehead. Okay, so and then it talks about the chains and the bracelets and the mufflers. Again, like some women might need mufflers, but this is not the muffler like you're thinking about. This has to do with like scarves, okay? Their bonnets and their headbands, it talks about the bonnets and the ornaments of their legs and the headbands and the tablets and the earrings. Now, tablets, from what I understand, are the decorations, without trying to be crude. I don't want to be crude, but the decorations that women wear on their chest, like a necklace that they wear on their chest, that would draw attention to the certain part of their body. I think that's what it's talking about, tablets, as I looked into that a little bit. And their earrings, the rings and the nose jewels. Okay, so that's nothing new. Nose jewelry like has been around for a while. And these ladies are wearing all these things and decorating themselves and tinkling feet and all these kinds of things. The changeable suits of apparel and the mantles and the wimples and the crisping pins, these have to do with like hair things that they do with their hair. And let me see. I can't remember what a wimple is. Anybody know? Head ornament of some sort? Huh? I can't remember. I looked it up, but I don't remember. I don't remember what it is. Okay. I think it's a word that is still used today, but I'm not sure if it means the same thing. It says the glasses. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't have these glasses, these types of glasses. The word glass in the Bible a lot of times is, what'd you say? It's a headdress. Okay. That's probably the thing I was talking about, the forehead. So glass has to do, you think about like looking glass as a mirror. Okay, so glasses, a lot of times we're talking about something that reflects light. And so I don't know if they're carrying around mirrors for the sake of looking at themselves or just kind of like a blingy, type thing. He says, in the linen, the fine linen and the hoods and the veils, and it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell, look, it's been nothing new for women to want to smell good and attract the attention of men and stuff like that. So, but instead of sweet smell, there shall be stink. And again, I can't help but think about women who, man, that would be an attractive woman, but she smells like smoke. Like, that's just my thing. Like, it smells like cheap, nasty smoke. And it's just like, that'll ruin a woman's smell for sure. I'm not preaching on smoking cigarettes, but I'm just saying the types of things. Like, this person no longer smells good, although they might be trying to smell good, but actually they stink, and they got all these kinds of things. Instead of a girdle, this would be like their belt and a rent. Instead of a girdle, a rent. I believe that's just talking about a rope, like tying up you don't have the nice clothes anymore, and you're just tying yourself up with a rope. And instead of well set hair, baldness. All right, you're going to lose your hair. You're going to be like I shouldn't say it. I won't say it. Somebody might slap me in the face if you didn't get that reference. Okay, and burning instead of beauty. Thy men shall fall by the sword, and thy mighty in war. Okay, so now we're talking about the men. So what about the men? All right, we're already talking about the women that are left. And the women are ruling over, and the children are oppressors, and all this kind of stuff. So where are the men? Well, that's a good question. Okay, where are the men? Thy men shall fall by the sword, and thy mighty in the war. And her gates shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate shall sit upon the ground. Now let's read chapter 4 real fast. And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by thy name to take away our reproach. So destitute women looking for a husband, they're like, 7 of them will be like, you know what? Let's just grab a man and we'll all take this man, and we have to be married. What that's saying is there's a whole lot of women and not very many men. You remember when I was a kid, I remember there being the statistic that was given that said, statistically speaking, there were 2 women for every man. Do you remember hearing that, or is it just me? Does anybody ever hear that before? When I was a kid, that's what I was told. 3? Okay, maybe before that it was 3. And I'll tell you what happened. Okay, I know why you would say 3 and I would say 2, and then today it's more evened out. Because God repaired it, I guess. All right, there's like an equilibrium. Where do you think we lost in our society a lot of men? At least the last time that it happened, World War II. Tons of men died. Okay, so now you're left with a bunch of women, and not as many men. And sure enough, after World War II, and I'm not trying to get into too much of this, but after World War II, guess what happened? Which was probably a big judgment upon our nation at that point. fact, a lot of people thought that was the time. The Antichrist is Hitler, you know what I mean? And they thought that this is it. You know, we're getting what the Bible talks about in Revelation and Matthew 24. Well, after that time where all these men died, you had women standing, you know, taking their place and becoming the men and wearing the pants, so to speak, of the family and standing up and running things. And next thing you know, all these businesses are owned by women and women's rights, you know, the activists are out there, you know, demanding women's rights. And next thing you know, the men that do come back from war, they're so messed up. You know, they become alcoholics and they got all these problems and they don't want to lead their family anymore. We saw that in our nation. And I'll tell you, it was a curse from God. And if you think that we're not getting, if you think we're not headed for another session of that, you're deceiving yourself, because we're heading exactly to that. We're doing all those things all over again, right? The women are rising up, children are present. Okay, maybe we're in a part of our society right now where the men, there's still enough men, statistically, like numerically, there's enough men. But you know what, I want to ask, really, well, where are the men in our society? Because the children are oppressors and the men aren't doing anything about it. The women are ruling over the men and the men aren't doing anything about it. So where are the men? You know, the men are just too concerned about just enjoying their life and taking the back seat, and they're not running their households and their families. Let's see here. It shall come to pass, verse 3, that he that is left in Zion and he that remaineth in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even unto one that is written among the living in Jerusalem. And the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. And the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day and a shining of flaming fire by night, for upon all the glory shall be a defense. And there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm of the rain. Here's the bottom line. If we will continue to live as God's people and obey God's commandments, like we talked about this morning, searching for the mountain of blessing, if we'll continue doing that, then even though we're watching this world around us cursed by God fall apart, in the end, right? He that endureth to the end shall be saved, right? In the end, I'm not talking about salvation. I'm talking about saved out of the tribulation of those days. Okay, he that endures to the end, serving the Lord, living for Him, all this wicked stuff that's going to take place, God's going to judge. In the end, we'll be tried by fire, and we'll come out ready for God to be our King, the Lord to be our King, and ready to be on Mount Zion, okay? And He will have washed away all the filth of the daughters of Zion and purged the blood of Jerusalem. Now again, I realize He was talking to specific people in a specific day. And I'm not taking away from the fact that Isaiah was a prophet to those people. Here's what I'm saying. From the very beginning of the Bible, anytime it talks about judgments, it still seems to apply to us. You go into the prophets and they're talking about the judgments upon the people and they're going to experience this. That sure applies to us as a nation and as a people. You go all the way to Revelation and you say, hey, this is what's going to happen. Looks just like the Old Testament, right? We might very well be there. It all is applicable to us because there is a curse for forsaking God and not living the way He tells us to and not following His commandments. Now, obviously, as I said this morning, we are not necessarily supposed to do every commandment in the Old Testament that was based towards Israel, okay? But we see from the Bible God's heart. We know what He wants us to do. The New Testament very specifically tells us what things we should do, the commandments that we should follow, and we need to live for Him, and we need to do these things, understanding the heart of God to the best of our ability, and stop walking like these cursed people in this earth that are going to be destroyed, because we don't want the destruction. We want the blessings from God. So we need to live for Him. Let's pray. Father, thank You for Your word. I thank You for this church. I thank You for our nation. But I pray, Lord, that You will help the righteous in this nation to stay faithful, be consistent in the faith and in serving you and preaching your word, standing up against evil. Lord, but I pray that you'll help us to just endure all the cursing of this earth that is inevitable, and just to endure that and keep moving forward in spite of it, seeking the blessings of God, even in the midst of a wicked, perverse generation. And I pray, Lord, that you'll show us, guide us, and direct us, that we might know how to live and what you expect of us and what you want out of us, so that we might experience those blessings. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.